Supervisor Williams.
I have a question for staff. What is the most common reason for the pending review status?
So the under review status is a combination of a multitude of different areas where it could be in review, whether that's initially at the first onset in the agriculture department, or as we've referred it out to other agencies, being our planning and building, going through our property profile protocol. So that's where you're getting that capture of in review. It is somewhere in the chain of review that's necessary for us to be able to issue out a county permit.
Okay, and then in queue, the application has not yet been assigned to an agricultural inspector. 190, it seems like it's been stuck somewhere around that number. What would it take to assign all of those applications?
Hello, Siobhan Holmes,
Okay.
Department of Agriculture, Cannabis Program Administrator. Essentially, because the volume of literal paperwork has been so great, in particular at the end of last year, at the close of our application process, we have a bit of a backlog. So what we tend to do is not assign a location to an inspector until all of the documents have been uploaded into our system. Over the winter break, the primary cannabis administrator was able to increase that to about 100. So at the end of this month, when we return to the board, you'll see a significant change there because essentially we've been playing catch up.
I have more, may I?
Go forward.
Are there any staff recommendations on how we can process the queue faster? I would like to hear what could your supervisors do to make sure we're getting everyone into the system, or the application's kicked out but not stuck in a holding pattern where month after month we see a large number still in review.
So we're currently doing the work in order to provide that, and I think that we're going to address that much more on the 22nd when we can have enough time to comprehensively understand all of the aspects of that. And I do plan on bringing that to you and to this board for review on the 22nd of January.
And then one last, does staff see any advantage in an EIR?
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski. In terms of, you perform CEQA at the outset of the project. So for this project, we did an initial study that was adopted as a mitigated negative declaration. If we do further changes to the project that would require additional CEQA review, those may or may not trigger a subsequent negative declaration or an environmental impact report given the changes that we're looking at. Right now, board direction from last year was to look at amendments to phase 3 to introduce use permits, and that may involve some level of CEQA review. I don't know that it would push it to an EIR on its own. So for the moment, there's no need to just perform an environmental impact report. Our CEQA was adopted.
One last. So I see that some other counties, Santa Barbara, Humboldt come to mind. They seem to be racing past us in revenue generated for their counties and applications approved. And I'm just wondering, what is the key difference? What are we doing that's making this process so slow? And this is not a criticism in any way of staff. I'm just wondering, what can we do to enable you? If it's that the applications are coming in paper form, maybe we need to have digital submission only and with some validation so that you're not stuck having to do that at a late stage. I don't know what those hurdles are, but I would sure like to hear from staff what we could do to help you.
Siobhan Holmes, Department of Agriculture. There are a number of suggestions and recommendations that could help sort of change the tempo at which we review applications. But I want to go back to your question regarding why are we so far behind comparatively to the other counties. And I would just like to offer the board a bit of a snapshot of the way in which this panel of people has collaborated and engaged with our additional outer agency stakeholders in order to make sure that we're on the same page. Our strategy has always been to know, for the right hand to know what the left hand is doing, and to create those relationships, develop those pathways, and get to the point where we are now, where we're conducting regular multi-agency inspections, and we're receiving and also issuing recommendations to other agencies in order for us to all have the same idea of what's going on has been our primary focus. Because one of the things that we learned in 2017 was that if you don't double check, you may issue something that later turns out to not be the truth or the correct information from a different agency. So part of it has been parsing through the documents we're receiving from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the documents we're receiving from the State Water Board, because all of those programs has changed as well. And so part of what I have observed with Mendocino County is the utmost and absolute care in order to make sure that when we issue a permit, it has been properly issued and it will stay issued and active. And so I can't speak for Humboldt or Sonoma County, but I can tell you that we know what's going on our grows. We know what our applicants need, and we're working at making sure we're moving them into their state process, because ultimately that's how they move forward. And so I think what I would offer you is we've worked really hard to make sure that the playing ground is level and equal. And now you will see us in general moving forward because we have the correct information. And I think for a very long time we did not. And it was because all of the agencies continued to change and the cultivators gave it their best. They have done as much as they can in order to keep up, but it's taken a couple of years to square it away. And you will see all of these numbers changing over the next few months. I guarantee it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. The board has previously directed we will only have one track and trace system, that when Metric's online, we would terminate our contract with SICPA. Metric is online, although not all of our applicants are eligible to enroll with it yet. So we're kind of obviously in this transition period. And in this interim, I think we're finding there's quite a bit of confusion and uncertainty. And I think the board potentially could refine our direction now that Metric is online. And staff, I believe, is moving in this direction already. But I think we could explicitly give the direction for staff to move forward and terminate the contract with SICPA as quickly as can legally be accomplished to provide an element of certainty.
Was that a motion?
Well, I think we can simply do it by direction, which we do have it on the agenda to give direction.
Which we can wrap up on. I just want to make sure everything's brought forward. And we have public comment. And
Yeah, I have a couple questions that aren't related to that, but I'm sure people are aware of this Cordova can coming into Covelo area. And so my question is, has Cordova Can filed an application for cultivation or any other cannabis-related activity?
Siobhan Holmes, Department of Agriculture. The corporation that you're referring to my knowledge, we do not have any pending applications submitted in the name of the corporation that you're referring to, no.
And
Do you have applications by anybody else representing that corporation?
Siobhan Holmes, Department of Agriculture. When someone wants to submit an application for cultivation, whether or not they provide the county with information about an entity is not required. So the only time we take information about any sort of legal business entity is if their request is that the permit is issued in the name of the entity.
Supervisor, go forward.
yeah. So under what circumstances can an entity have existing growers with permits or growers that have filed applications on their land as employees? Is that a possibility?
Siobhan Holmes, Department of Agriculture. As of right now, we are not accepting applications. So I will refer to Phase 1 applications specifically. To be eligible to submit a cultivation application in Mendocino County under Phase 1, you are required to demonstrate proof of prior cultivation. If there is a legal entity that is seeking a cultivation permit in Mendocino County, the entity itself also has to meet the proof of prior requirement.
Thank you.
Translation, excuse me.
Supervisor McCallum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Therefore, this corporation would not be eligible to submit an application in their name. They have made it clear in their presentation at the Covelo Library through their representative, who I believe represented himself as the local expert conversant with our ordinance, essentially said to the people present that they were making an arrangement with local growers who would then be using their permits to grow on the corporation's property. That's obviously an employee relationship is what they were describing. So even if the entity were eligible to apply, they could only apply for 2 permits. So they couldn't have a stable of contract growers working for them. So I'm not sure they're quite yet able to do what they hope to do.
Question for staff and council potentially. Does our Measure H GML ordinance apply to cannabis?
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski, the Ag Department contacted me last year. I think they'd had inquiries about this. We're looking at, I don't think it doesn't apply to cannabis, but that being said, we're still looking into what it does apply to and how it would come into effect in this situation and how to reach out to the corporation.
Are applicants notified of the ordinance so that they can have the awareness of how to comply?
I'm not aware that they are, but I'm not aware that they aren't.
Siobhan Holmes, Department of Agriculture. Are cannabis cultivation applicants aware of our ordinance that bans genetically modified?
Correct.
I couldn't speak to the entire population of our applicant pool. I can tell you that most of the people who grow cannabis in Mendocino County are quite familiar with how restrictive the Department of Agriculture is. In particular, Mendocino County has a very specific relationship to the farmers that are here. And so most of our cannabis growers are well aware of conventional agriculture as well.
So now, Supervisor, did you have more?
I had one more question.
Okay. Go
Following
forward.
up with Supervisor Williams' question about the GMO ban, is there an opinion out there about whether this CRISPR technology would fall under the GMO ban?
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski, through the chair, that's what we're looking into. That's part of the issue of what we know, what we don't know about the corporation, where they are, where they aren't in terms of an application, and how that fits into the Measure H process. And CRISPR, how does that work with the language in the existing ordinance?
Supervisor Jurdy.
I think the voters in Mendocino County were very clear that they wanted to ban GMOs, and so whether or not the language in the adopted ordinance is in fact binding here or not, I think the board would like to know as soon as possible if somehow there's a loophole in the ordinance, because I suspect the board would like to amend the ordinance to close that loophole.
All righty, we're gonna go forward with public comment. After public comment, we are gonna take